Let's continue with the third and final part of the tutorial. Now we will implement the add, edit and delete functions. Well, first we will associate and generate the events of the view. For this we go to the form code. In the same way as before, in the associate and raise view events method, we will invoke these events when the corresponding buttons are clicked. Let's start with the add new event. So we'll invoke the add new event when the add new button is pressed. We do the same for the edit, delete, save changes and cancel event. Well, once we have finished associating the events, we must show the Detail tab and hide the Data List tab when the Add or Edit button is clicked. In the same way, when the changes are saved correctly or Cancel is clicked, we must hide the Detail tab and show the Data List again. So when the click event of the Add button is raised, we remove the Pet List tab and add the Pet Detail tab. To make the app a bit more interactive, we'll also change the title of the tab, for example Add New Pet. We do the same for when the edit event is raised. Now when the Save button is clicked, the Detail tab should be hidden, and the pet list shown again. However, that should happen as long as the operation has been successful. The value of this property will be set from the presenter. So if the operation was successful, we remove the Detail tab and re-add the Pet List tab. We will also display in a message box with the result of the operation. In the same way for the Cancel event, the Detail tab must be hidden, and the list of pets must be shown again. Finally, in the click event of the Delete button, in this case the pet will be deleted directly without going through the Detail tab. Then we will show a warning message with yes and no buttons, that if you are sure to delete the selected pet. The show method of the message box returns a dialog result, so we assign it to a variable, and check if the user clicked the yes button. If true, we invoke the delete event. Similarly as in save event, we also display the result message of the operation. Alright, that's all for the view. Now we'll implement the event handler methods, that is, what the app should do when the add, edit, or delete event is raised. To do this we go to the Pet Presenter class. In this first part of the tutorial we subscribe to the events of the view. For example, the method load data of the selected pet to be edited, is subscribed to the edit event. Now we will implement these event handler methods. That is what is going to be done when the event is executed as I mentioned above. So when the add new event is raised, We will only change the edit state of the view to false, since the save event will be in charge of adding or editing the data. Now when the edit event is raised, we will load the data of the selected pet in the text boxes of the form to be able to edit it. To do this we need to get the pet model, so we access the binding source of the pet list and get the object of the currently selected row. This property gets the current item from the underlying list. As I said in the first part of the tutorial, the binding source class is native to the Windows Forms assembly, and has many benefits as it creates a binding between a data control and the data source. In the implementation of the method in the form, the binding source of the pet list is set to the data source of the data grid view, so all further interaction with the data is done with calls to the binding source component, so it serves many purposes. Well, let's continue. Once the model to be edited is obtained, we assign the value of the properties to the properties of the view, that is, to the text boxes. Finally, we change the edit state of the view to true. This value changes based on user action, whether data is added or edited, with the save event taking care of the final work. So we implement this method. First we create a pet model instance. We then pass the data from the view to the model. Okay, now we define a try-catch block to catch the errors. If any errors occur, we tell the view that the operation was unsuccessful and also set the error message. Well, before adding or editing a pet, we need to validate that the data in the model is correct. Since in the model we did some validations, for example, not allowing empty data and the minimum and maximum length. However, these validator attributes need to be processed to perform the corresponding validations. For that job there are also some classes in the model components data annotation assembly to do that task, so we will create a class to validate any model, since in an application we will have many more models. So in the presenter we will add a folder for the common task classes. In it we add a class to validate the model data. We define a method to validate an object. We define a field for the validation error message. We then define a list for the result of the validations, and a context for the model validation. Now we determine if the model is valid or not. For this we use the validator helper class and call the try to validate object method. As parameters we send the object, the context, the collection of results and indicate that all properties must be validated. Well, we define a condition. If the model is not valid, we loop through the result list to extract the validation error messages, and set it to the local error message field. Here we can return the Boolean value or message as a result of the method, and thus check it from the presenter, or we can simply throw an exception with the error messages and catch it in the try-catch block. To make it clearer for those people who are just starting out in this, in case the data of the model is not valid, this exception will be caught by the try-catch block in the presenter. And the exception message is set to the view's result message. The data validation error message is assigned in the model validation attributes. Therefore, these messages are the ones that will be displayed in the view in case the values of the model properties are not valid. Alright, let's continue. So before adding or editing, we validate the pet model. Now, if the edit state of the view is true, we edit the model. For this we call the edit method of the repository, and as a parameter we send the model. Then we set the result message, for example, pet successfully edited. Otherwise, if the condition is not met, we add a new pet record. Finally, we establish that the operation was successful, and we refresh the view using the load all pet list method. Also, after saving the changes, we will clean the text boxes of the view. The default value of the ID field should be 0, as this is a numeric field, otherwise an error would be thrown. In the rest we set empty strings. Alright, in the cancel event, we just clear the view's fields. Finally, we implement the functionality of the remove selected pet event. In the same way as above, we use a try-catch block. We get the currently selected pet model in the data grid view's binding sources. We then call the remove repository method, and send the pet ID to remove. We indicate that the operation was successful, and we set a message. Finally, we update the list. Now, if an error occurs, we indicate that the operation was not successful, and we set a message. It is not recommended to show all the details of the error message to the end user, but to set a short and personalized message. Alright, that's it on the presenter. Now we only need to implement the add, edit and delete methods of the repository. Let's start with the add new record method, in the same way as we did in the get all method. Using the using statement, we create the SQL connection and command object. We open the connection, and set the connection to the command, then we assign the text command, in this case, insert in the pets table the following values: name, type and color. The ID is auto-incremental, so it is not necessary to insert it. OK. Now we create and add those parameters to the command's parameter collection, specify the name and data type, then set the corresponding value. Finally, we execute the operation. We do similarly for the delete and edit method. Alright, that's it. Let's test the app. The edit and delete function is working correctly. Data validation is also working fine. Well, the add function is also fine. Here I forgot to set the ID text box to read only. You can change the value and this will produce an error as it is not possible to convert a string to a number. Also the ID field is auto-incrementing so you don't need to specify this data. So we set the number 0 in the text box as the default value, and specify that the field is read-only, although it would be better to initialize the field from the presenter, but well, for a quick fix it's fine. Well, everything is working fine, but this project can be improved much more. You can give it your personal touches, like improving the structure of the code and customizing the appearance. Well, that's all in this tutorial. I hope you liked it. Until next time.